Good morning and welcome to our UUCP Zoom service. And now we preface our service by acknowledging that the land on which our homes and our church were built was not uninhabited when European settlers arrived here with their ideas of conquest and ownership. For those of us who live in Moscow, Pullman, or other nearby communities, we live on the ancestral homelands of the Nimipu, called Nez Perce by the French-speaking traders, the Palouse, and the Chichonch, called the Coeur d'Alene. If you are joining us from another place, I encourage you to discover who inhabited or moved through the place where you now live in the times before colonization and genocide. We pause and remember that we live on ground that is sacred, ground that was stolen, ground that cries out for justice and for responsible stewardship. May our remembering help us find the courage to do our part to restore wholeness to the earth and all her peoples. And now let's join our voices together for our words of welcome, our unison chalice lighting, and our sung affirmation. Whoever you are, wherever you've come from, whatever your beliefs, whomever you love, and however bumpy your life's journey, know that you are welcome here. We're hoping that everyone has a chalice or a candle to light and something to light it with. Let's go ahead and light those now.
Hello, I'm Ginger Yoder and I am going to light our chalice this morning. In the light of truth and the warmth of love, we gather to seek and seek to share.
From all that dwell below the skies, let songs of hope and love arise. Let beauty, truth, and good be sung in every land, by every tongue.
We are in the midst of the Jewish High Holy Days. Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, began last Monday at sunset, and Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, begins this Wednesday evening and ends at nightfall on Thursday. For Jewish people, the 10 days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, the High Holy Days, are the culmination of an entire 40-day month spent reflecting on the year before, and they offer a fresh start, a recommitment to the values of the Jewish faith, and to the well-being of the community and the world. Meanwhile, a new academic year is underway as well. Our teachers and students have found their way back, and this year it is wild and woolly and different than any other year. Thanks, COVID. And thanks, weird chain of events that somehow made wearing masks and getting vaccinated anathema to a sizable chunk of the population. It has been a bumpy ride thus far this fall, and with hospitals full to overflowing, it looks to get bumpier before it gets better. So in line with our river theme this month, we'll spend this morning reflecting on ways to navigate conflict, ways to ride the rapids. Thank you for joining us this morning. And now let's sing together our opening hymn, There's a River.
And
And now I invite you into a time of meditation or prayer with these words by my colleague, Israel Bafarde. This is the work of creation. We must breathe to live, but our bodies also need water to survive. Our bodies are more than half water. The air we breathe contains tiny droplets of water vapor. Can you feel them in your breath? Flowing in and out of your body like waves gently rolling in and out from the shore. Ancient Hebrew tradition says that before the earth was created, the world was a wild ocean full of dangerous sea monsters. Our world may sometimes feel like a wild ocean. We may feel like we are fighting against impossibly strong sea monsters. But the waters are as mighty and powerful as the sea monsters, and that power runs in and through us with each breath, in and out. As we breathe out, may we feel the rhythm of our breath, like the powerful waves crashing on the shores, turning and tumbling the largest boulders into the tiniest grains of sand. As we breathe in, may we feel the restorative power of air and water nourishing the cells of our bodies, giving us the power to pursue our wildest dreams for our community and our world. And as you breathe, notice the sounds, in like the whistle of the mighty ocean, out like the crashing of the powerful waves. Let us breathe and listen to those sounds together now as we find our strength to begin the work of creation anew. In silence, let us breathe together.
וחרמה וקונמה וחינויה וכינוסי ושבועות דין דרנה ורשתבנה ורחמימנה ותעשרנה על נפשתנה מיום כיפורים זה עד יום כיפורים הבא עלינו לטובה כולם יכרת נבון כולם ירון שרן שוויקין שוויתין בטלין ומבוטלין לשבירים ולקיימים נדרנה לנדרה esaranala esare ushevuatana la Shavuot.
Wow, I hadn't listened to that video the whole way through before, so I didn't realize the piano came back in at the end. For those of you who aren't musicians, who don't realize what an incredible thing you just witnessed, for her to hold pitch throughout that entire piece and still be like right there, it was stunning and a little miraculous, actually. Sorry. Homily, right. I was talking to a rafter friend the other day when my brain made a weird little leap. My friend was talking about how most rapids around here fall between class 2 and 4. And I remembered that the Speedley's model for conflict management identifies conflict levels on a scale of 1 to 4. Speedley's is a well-known organizational consultant. And it kind of made me wondering what strategies for approaching rapids on rivers might have to teach us about conflict and vice versa. Now, I am not an experienced rafter, so my insight into the vice versa is probably in the limited to none range. But it turns out I'm actually a little bit of an expert on conflict. I served on the Healthy Congregations team for the Pacific Northwest District and the Western region of the UUA. I've also served as a good officer for over a decade, and that's a service that consists of coaching my colleagues through their turbulence and turmoil. I have taught workshops and classes, and lately I've been specializing in my denominational service and helping people understand the impact of trauma on congregational systems, the way it makes congregations both more prone to conflict while also diminishing people's ability to navigate that conflict skillfully and with grace. So it felt right and appropriate to play with this metaphor of conflict as rapids on this day that falls in the midst of the Jewish High Holy Days. First of all, the practices of accountability, forgiveness, and repair are central both to the observance of the holidays and to successful conflict management. Secondly, many Jews engage in a particular practice called Tashley, which involves casting crumbs or pebbles that represent mistakes, failures, and regrets into moving water so that the water can carry them away. Beyond the metaphor and the Jewish High Holy Days, this feels like a good time to reflect on strategies that help us navigate difficult conversations and situations, because we have a lot of difficult conversations and situations to navigate. Differences of opinion over masks and vaccines now have life-threatening consequences. And I would venture a guess that there are few among us who aren't struggling to figure out how to navigate those conversations. So, hop in the boat, hop in the raft, and come along for this ride. Level 1 conflicts, according to Speedley's, are simply problems to be solved. They arise from different priorities, needs, and opinions, but the people involved are able to focus on the problem rather than the people or personalities that are involved. Class 1 rapids, meanwhile, are easy and smooth, only slight riffles. You still have to pay attention. There might be obstacles or sandbars, but there's not a lot of danger, and there are options. There are places to go. You can easily chart a safe course. The key skill for navigating through level 1 conflicts is to keep from escalating. We have to stay non-anxious. We remain flexible, open to compromise, changing our minds. We refrain from making personal attacks. Here's a real life example. A small group that's meeting in person had a conversation this week about whether they should stay home whether a person should stay home if a member of their household has a possible COVID exposure. I wasn't actually there for the conversation, but I assume there were a range of opinions and strategies discussed, and the group gradually came to consensus. It was not a big deal. A conflict rises to become level 2 when personalities get involved. The issues get confused, clouded, trust begins to erode just a little. Paddling.com defines class 2 rapids as medium quick water, rapids with regular waves. There are clear and open passages between rocks and ledges, but maneuvering is required. It's best handled by intermediates who can skillfully steer canoes and read water. So to navigate class 2 rapids, it helps to know what you're doing. As a good officer, the advice I gave most often to my colleagues was, as soon as you feel emotionally activated, it's time to call in a coach. With level 2 conflicts, there's usually a clear way forward to be found, but you need to choose your course with care. And we tend not to respond well if we're feeling personally attacked. In these times when we're all on edge anyway, that threshold of feeling attacked comes a lot sooner than usual. Here's a real life example of a level 2 conflict. I posted something on social media about how it's convenient to advocate for the unborn because they're morally uncomplicated. And as soon as they're born, you don't have to worry about them anymore. A friend reached out and told me that my post had hurt her feelings. Now, I know her to be a good and kind person who does many generous things in the wider community. So I told her that, and I apologized for hurting her feelings. Then I named my frustration with the people who claim to be pro-life, but then refuse to wear a mask or get vaccinated, putting other people at great risk. She empathized with my frustration. I took down the post, and we emerged on the other side, still friends, still feeling good about one another. It was not a huge deal, but it took a little bit of skill. Both she and I had to manage our emotional response to that feeling of being attacked or judged. At level 3, a conflict becomes a contest. The people involved slide into a win-lose mindset, and their personal attacks. People tend to start to play politics. They'll recruit allies, solidify into factions or camps. Now, there's no shortage of level 3 conflict for us to move through these days. There are brief exchanges that we can do our best to prepare for. How do we respond to the person who refuses to wear a mask or leave some room between us in the grocery store? How do we respond to the person who commits a microaggression or a macroaggression against a person of color, a member of the LGBTQIA community, or somebody else who holds marginalized identities? Then there are opportunities like city hearings on new developments around town or mask ordinances. We have the potential for interactions with family members or friends who haven't been vaccinated but still want to come to our home for celebrations. Level 3 conflict is a little bit scary, and it's hard, and it can be dangerous. Class 3 rapids, according to my rafter friend, are quite a bit more complicated than class 2. They have numerous high and uneven waves, eddies, and rocks. There are ways to make it through, but it's not easy or obvious. Ideally, you want somebody who's already gotten through to show you the way. Now, on rivers, that's a practical thing to find. My river guide explained that on class 3 or 4 rapids, the most experienced person goes first. So y'all stop at the top of the rapids, and the most experienced person goes first and shows the way. And then each boat heads in one at a time. She also talked about the green tongue, the importance of finding the right spot to enter the rapids. And then she also said everyone waits until everyone is ready. If someone wants to stop before entering, the whole group stops and there are no arguments. So this makes me think about a couple of practices in level 3 conflict management. It's best if the conflict rises to this level to find a guide, an outside mediator who isn't attached to any of the outcomes, who can hold the space and hold a broader perspective on what the currents and the issues are. It also can really help to have extra support people around to help everyone stay grounded and centered. We move through conflict better when we feel loved and cared for. So finding that green tongue, entering with care, speaks about the importance of being intentional and careful about choosing an approach to a difficult conversation. That green tongue is the place in the river where the water runs deepest. Our approach to conflict should come from our deepest values. We want to be grounded and focused and in flow, strongly connected to our spirit and our intuition, and paying a lot of attention to what's swirling around us. Lastly, that waiting for everybody to be ready before we go speaks to the importance of gaining permission in conflict. I know I've gone over this before, but when we're talking to somebody who has a difference of opinion, the best process comes out of the Harvard Business School, and it begins with asking the person to share their opinion and listening carefully, identifying shared values or common ground, and then asking permission to share the ways that your perspective is different before going on to do so. For whatever reason, this is the process that occasionally, not always, but occasionally works to help shift people's perspectives and bridge some of these deep and difficult divides in our culture right now. In both conflict and in river rafting, level floor or class 4 rapids are really quite dangerous. My river guide friend says this is the biggest she tries to handle. And in her mind, the difference between a class 3 and a class 4 is that in a class 3, you can choose your line and kind of follow it all the way through, just steering as needed to stay on the right course. In class 4, the current's going to push you into a wall or a boulder. So at some point, you have to change course to get around the obstacle. She talked about upstream ferries and downstream ferries, rowing either frontward or backward diagonally across the current in order to change course. It sounded exhausting, and she said that it takes a lot of strength to do this. Level 4 conflicts, meanwhile, have escalated to the point where relationship is irrevocably broken, and some people leave. I've walked with colleagues through these kinds of situations, and it is heartbreaking. It often feels like no matter what we do, no matter which course we choose, things are going to keep breaking apart. I would venture a guess that all of us know that feeling. In these fractured and challenging times, it's all too common to see broken relationships, friendships smashed apart, family members estranged from one another. We could take a broader perspective. And when we do that, we see that the brokenness is all around us. There are so many heartbreaking messes created by war, unbridled capitalism, racism, sexism, and other forms of oppression. Somehow, the social contract in which everyone agrees to temper their decisions and care for each other, everyone agrees to value the common good, that social contract doesn't seem to be holding. It is falling apart. The river guide friend says that the second most experienced person goes last so that they can help anyone who's flipped over or pick up any passengers or gear that fell overboard. In other words, they're the cleanup crew. They go through to help people who have had trouble. And I'm increasingly convinced that that's really the work of these times. The boat built by Mother Culture isn't fit to bring us home. So we create these smaller boats, these community circles that are more nimble and focused. And we pick our way through the wreckage, salvaging what is good and necessary to the best of our ability. I need to say here that first rule they teach you when you take Red Cross first aid is that you don't help someone if you can't do so safely, which makes me think about boundaries. And this great quote I saw the other day by Prentice Hemphill: boundaries are the distance at which I can love you and myself simultaneously. Let me say that again. Boundaries are the distance at which I can love you and myself simultaneously. Being loving and compassionate doesn't mean being codependent. We needn't allow ourselves to be demeaned or abused. Some people, turns out, really only safe to love in the abstract. Now on the river, there are classes of rapids beyond class 4, and it is okay to opt out. That said, when we opt out of a particular relationship, we need to remain committed to the overall journey of love and compassion. No one has to do any more than is safe and realistic, but we all need to do what we can. So this is the work then. This is the work of riding the rapids. We keep ourselves safe. We stay mindful and aware. We recruit support and guides. We lean on people who are experienced. We prepare ourselves to salvage what we can if things fall apart. None of us are perfect. Being human is hard. Being in relationship is hard. We make mistakes. We can't always get along, but we can return again and again to center, to breath, to the present moment. We can commit and recommit ourselves over and over again to practicing compassion, accountability, forgiveness, kindness, generosity, self-care. We can choose to believe that the turbulence has a purpose and that somehow things are getting stirred up so that a better, more resilient and sustainable pattern can emerge. The river is just trying to find its way to the sea. And so, my dear ones, are we. Have faith. Stay faith. Have faith. Stay safe and stick together. So be it. So we're going to move now into a ritual of release and recommitment. So I invite you to take a few deep breaths and prepare yourselves.
I'd invite you now to bring to mind any situation where you feel conflict, tension, anger, or rage. Breathe into your feelings. Sink into them until you find the root cause. Maybe there's fear down there, or grief, anticipatory grief, or grief in the present moment. Maybe you'll find shame. Turn toward these difficult feelings and offer them and yourself compassion and acceptance. Now bring to mind the people who are on the other side of those conflicts. As you hold them in your thoughts, feelings will come again, and maybe some of the same feelings, but maybe different ones. Turn toward those feelings. Sink into them. Then, when you are ready, offer compassion and acceptance to these folks, anyone who has caused hurt or harm to you or the people you love, anyone you have hurt or harmed. If either of these things are hard for you, one way to get there is to imagine a young child whom you love very much, maybe a child or a grandchild, a niece, a nephew, even a pet, a beloved pet. Hold them in your heart with the fierce tenderness that comes naturally. Then slowly, gently, holding that same fierce tenderness, swap them out for your own precious self. Maybe it needs to be you as a child if that feels easier. And then do the same when you're ready for the person with whom you have experienced conflict. None of us are perfect, and being human is hard. Being in relationship is hard. We make mistakes. We can't always get along. But to find the way through the rapids, we have to love people even when we don't like them, even when we can't accept their actions or their choices. So let us recommit together to the work of loving, of weaving beloved community, holding that fierce love and letting it expand to encompass all people. Let's move together through the Litany of Atonement. Words by Rob Eller Isaacs. Music by Les Clean. For remaining silent when a single voice would have made a difference.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
years have made us rigid and inaccessible.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For each time we have struck out in anger without just cause.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For each time that our greed has blinded us to the needs of others.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For the selfishness that set us apart and alone.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For falling short of the admonitions of the Spirit.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For losing sight of our unity.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For those and for so many acts, both evident and subtle, which have fueled the illusion of separateness.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
This practice is accessible to us anytime, not just at the turning of the Jewish New Year. We can choose to begin again in love, again and again and again, in every season of the year, every day, every breath. I release the illusion of separateness. We begin again in love. Given the current tone of discourse, grounding our difficult interactions in love for ourselves and others may not actually work. But I know this. Giving in to the temptation to attack, shame, or blame will definitely not work. So in the face of ugliness or uncertainty, even in the face of meanness, the best thing we can do is continue to tend our own soul. Our closing reading is The Offering, a Tashley prayer by Rabbi Jill Hammer. I cast this gift to the water. It is my past, blessing and regret. It is my present, reflection and listening. It is my future, intention and mystery. It is what I did and did not. It is yes and no and silence. It is what was done and what arose from what was done and what arises in this body, remembering. I let it all go. I own neither the sting nor the sweetness. I hold on to nothing. The river has no past. Each moment of rushing water is a new beginning. harm that has been, heal in the rush of love and truth and time. We who are lost, let the current take us homeward. May these waters churn what is broken into what is whole. May each separate droplet reach the ocean that is becoming. The journey awaits. I have no power to refrain from it, only to steer it when I can. May the one who is the great crossroad guide my turning. 3 times I declare, it is finished, it is born, it is unending. 3 times I listen, it is love, it is the river, it is before me. May my offering go where it is meant to go, and may the one who offers it find the way. Amen.
I invite you to join me now in saying the words to embody our flame. We extinguish the chalice that it might glow gently in our hearts. May it light our paths as we leave this place, and may it guide our way until we are together again. Oh, beloveds, what times we live in. It is wild and it is woolly, and we'll get through it. We'll get through it together because we have buoyant, resilient spirits, and because we have each other. We have each other. So we'll stick together and we will stay safe and we will make it through. I love you. Have a good week.